Hi, everyone. My name is Yuchen. Can you hear me?
Yes.
OK, cool. I'm an engineer on the security team at TrustToken. How do you move to the next slide? Is it scroll? Yeah, it worked. OK. Cool. So TrustToken is actively developing TrueFi, which is an uncollateralized lending protocol. And we've originated just over $1.7 billion in loans so far. This will be a talk from the perspective of a relatively newer protocol, not as established as Maker or Compound or some of the previous ones. And so you'll see some of these practices as things you might do when you're experiencing growing pains going from something that doesn't exist to the first or second iteration. I'll start this talk with a parable. So this one is often known as the streetlight effect. An officer sees a drunk man searching for his keys under a streetlight, and he asks, "Did you lose your keys here?" To which the drunk man responds, "No, but this is where the light is." There's a fairly obvious lesson here, but I think it's worth making it explicit. Namely, we only search where it's easy to look, even when what we want is hard to find. So with this in mind, I think there are two core questions that drive our security team, which are, how do we search where the bugs actually are before they get exploited? And for those who care about velocity and budget, when do we know when we searched enough and we can actually ship this? So before we can answer these, I want to go over some lessons that TrustToken learned from our experiences in 2021 when we were just getting started with this protocol. About a year ago, this was what we thought was the standard practice for releasing new contracts. I think this is what Kurt earlier mentioned as audit-driven development. You write some code, you submit it to an auditor, fix whatever they say went wrong, and then deploy it and hope for the best. And the results were promising at first. Our team's audit reports mostly looked like this. We, have a couple low severity issues, nothing major, so it seems great. But every couple months, we would scramble to respond to an incident caused by a bug that made it past our code review and our audit. This would be things like miscalculated user rewards, or avoidable gas fees, or upgrades that almost corrupted storage that we caught ahead of time, but just before it actually affected anything. So very fortunately, we never lost user funds due to a critical bug. But it's very clear that our code review and audits clearly weren't catching what they should have. So how do we actually search for where the bugs actually are? And I think our perspective here is that the first step is to find better streetlights. And to do that, we need a way to measure the quality of a light. So we started injecting bugs to see whether auditors would find them. It's actually a lot easier than you might think. You write code that has bugs in it. They're just unavoidable. And then during code review, if you notice a bug, you don't fix it. You don't comment on it. You just leave it there. But what's really important is that you have to have a process to make sure that you don't forget about the bug as well. So every time you want to inject a bug, you privately record a description of the bug. We put this in a private repo, and hash it and salt it. And the reason we do this is so that we can send a list of hashes to our auditors within the audit scope. If we send them a list of hashes, they can't come back to us and say, "Hey, we found these bugs that you'd included. Your code is pretty awful." We can reply and say, "Actually, we knew about these bugs before the audit started." I'll actually jump back to the previous slide a bit. One of the other tricks that we have is we might give them 10 hashes, and then only 7 or 8 of them are actually injected bugs. This is so that there's no incentive for an auditor to say, "Oh, we found all 7 or 8 of your bugs. We're going to stop paying attention." So we also inject fake bugs with placeholder names. And this is just to make sure that we keep them on their toes. And so if an auditor finds most or all of the bugs, we know that they're scrutinizing at least as closely as our own code reviews. I wanted this to be clear. It's at least as closely as our own code reviews. It's not saying they're doing a particularly good job if we're not doing a good job ourselves. But if they find few or no bugs, then we know that they're missing a lot. We can't trust that their report is saying our code is secure. And this is the point at which we should start looking for a new auditor for the next cycle. One thing here is that it doesn't have to go in only one direction. It really shouldn't go into one direction. Once we have auditors that we can trust, the next step to realize is that you can flip the benchmark around and figure out what kinds of bugs, what classes of vulnerabilities the code reviews are missing that the auditors are catching. Or among the other programs that we've started, we can start benchmarking things like our bug bounty program against our formal verification efforts. And so here we can make realizations of, actually, maybe we should be increasing the bounty amount because clearly the the talent pool that's willing to go after the current bounty rewards we're offering isn't high enough of a quality. And so with benchmarking, we can have an impartial way to determine each strategy's relative effectiveness at detecting bugs. And so given finite time and energy, we can target our efforts to the most effective ones. So it's always possible to be more paranoid. We could keep on delaying launches and keep on saying, we're not ready yet. There's more and more things that we should test and check out. But when you've got the CEO breathing down your neck, eventually you need to ship. So how can we tell when our efforts are good enough? Well, we can borrow some methods from population estimates in ecology. So I'm going to gloss over a lot of critical assumptions here. If there's time at the end, and I guess this will be during the Q&A session, I'm happy to discuss how violating these assumptions can be very, very dangerous, and you should think carefully about and think twice before you trust the next several slides. But the basic intuition is that if you have some unknown number of bugs to catch, you can measure the overlaps in your samples to estimate the total number of bugs. What do I mean? Here's an example. Suppose you injected 9 bugs and an auditor finds 10. And of those 10, 8 of them overlap with the injected bugs, which is to say 80% of the bugs that this auditor finds are injected. So if we assume that the 80% injected rate can generalize to the whole population, then the total number of bugs would be approximately the 9 that were injected divided by 80%, so just over 11 bugs. In this estimate, we would say we probably caught all of the bugs. I'm putting fine print at the bottom. Please do ask me about the fine print because you should not trust this blindly. And here's another example. We take the same 9 injected bugs, and the auditor is still finding 10 of them, but this time there's only 1 in the overlap. I want you to stop for a moment and reflect on what this means. This should raise some red flags for your intuition, because only 10% of the found bugs are injected. So how many must be out there? 90. We end up with an estimate of 90 bugs. We're missing the vast majority of them. This is an audit report that's this exact same number of found bugs and the exact same number of injected bugs, but we're getting an order of magnitude higher estimate for the number of bugs that exist out there in our code. So in the Capture-Recapture literature, this is something that's known as the Lincoln-Peterson estimator. It's a simple and hopefully intuitive method to estimate populations, although I will note that it gives some biased estimates for the small numbers that we typically encounter. I introduced it here because I think it's the easiest to explain for intuition, But if you want more accurate estimates, I would recommend that you check out other kind of estimators in the literature. This is statistics from the 1980s or so. So things to look out at first are the Chapman estimator or the jackknife estimators. Depends on your situation. So I want to bring this all back together. For a release earlier this year, we recorded all of the medium, high, and critical severity bugs, and also which strategies found which of these bugs. So in this Venn diagram, the numbers tell you how many bugs are in each particular overlap. We used a Chapman estimator for pairs. A Chapman estimator for pairs of strategies. And with that, we guessed that there's approximately 23 bugs total. So if we found 21, then that means we're estimating there's about 2 more that we haven't found. 7 of these bugs were injected during code review. Auditor A found 8 of the bugs, and these 8 overlapped with all of our other strategies, although only 3 of them overlapped with the injected bugs. So we decided that they're doing an okay job, and we would continue with them in the next release. Auditor B only found 1 bug that we actually cared about, and none of the injected bugs. So this didn't make our cut, and we had to go and search for a new auditor and replace them for the next release. Our bug bounty performed pretty poorly, so we took that as a sign that we should make some changes to its format and test if that would improve the findings. And we gave feedback to our engineering teams about their blind spots. I think in this case, a lot of it was related to verifying off-chain ECDSA signatures or updating all of the right storage variables when a user modifies a loan. And lastly, I think one of the big takeaways for us is that we can put a lot more confidence in our formal verification team because they found 17 out of the 21 bugs. So here's a recap of the 2021 audit-driven development release cycle. And this is what it looks more like now. We inject bugs by not fixing the issues that come up during code review. We run audits, formal verification, and a bug bounty all in parallel on the same audit scope and commit hash. This is to make sure that they're all off of the same population. You're not having bugs enter and exit. And after all the reports come back, we use Capture-Recapture models to estimate how many bugs remain. And this helps us decide whether the code is okay to launch. We've decided to pause and actually say we're not launching things because our audits have come back and we weren't comfortable with the level of security. And after a launch, we take the lessons we've learned and from benchmarking each of the bug finding strategies to decide what to change in the next cycle. So some takeaways: we want to see these techniques adopted as best practices across the entire industry. And why is that? I think the more engineering teams inject bugs or benchmark their audits or estimate how much they're missing, the stronger the industry as a whole will become. We think auditors should welcome this as well. They get feedback about what their audit process might be missing. And this feedback doesn't come with front page news reports and a bunch of bad publicity. It comes from just the day-to-day practices of doing your work and reviewing it. Lastly, it is a chance for the good auditors to set themselves apart from the ones that give rubber stamps. All right, that's it for me. I'll leave questions for the discussion at the end.